The Mummy wasn't just an action film, it was chaos buried in desert sand. But behind the pulp spectacle, it was danger on every level. Leonardo DiCaprio nearly became Rick O'Connell. The Sahara turned filming into a survival test, and what started as a studio gamble rose again as a cult favorite. These are 20 weird facts about The Mummy. And buried beneath the tomb dust and the scarabs, The Mummy had dozens of failed versions. This wasn't just pulp adventure, it was a curse that refused to die. Number 1. Before Brendan Fraser cracked a whip in the desert, The Mummy was a curse Hollywood couldn't shake. For nearly 10 years, Universal tried to bring it back, and every attempt crumbled. Horror master Clive Barker pitched a surreal art house nightmare about a haunted museum owner who collects occult relics. Too dark, too strange. The studio buried it. Then Joe Dante stepped in with a tragic romance, a reimagined love story with Daniel Day-Lewis as a brooding, Shakespearean version of The Mummy. The idea collapsed under budget fights. George Romero wrote a version where a modern archaeologist uses an MRI to resurrect Imhotep, blending medical tech with horror satire. Universal balked. Wes Craven circled the project too, but his vision never left the page. Over and over, The Mummy stayed in the tomb. Too weird, too grim, too expensive. It wasn't until Stephen Sommers pitched something no one else had, a swashbuckling throwback with romance, comedy, and pulp adventure, that the curse finally broke. Dozens of versions had turned to dust, but the one that lived brought the dead back to life. Number 2. The Mummy almost stayed buried as a tiny $15 million B-movie. Universal was ready to make it cheap, quick, and forgettable. And then came The Pig. Not a rival blockbuster, not a failed epic, a children's sequel. Babe, Pig in the City. It flopped so badly it triggered a management shakeup at the studio. The new executives wanted a big swing to prove they could deliver. And suddenly, Stephen Sommers' desert adventure exploded from a modest $15 million project into an $80 million gamble overnight. All because of one unlucky pig. A talking farm animal cleared the path for one of the wildest action hits of the 1990s. Number 3. In 1997, Leonardo DiCaprio was the biggest star in the world. Titanic had turned him into a global icon, and studios fought over his next move. When Universal sent him the script for The Mummy, DiCaprio wanted it badly. He was ready to trade the ocean for the desert, to go from tragic lover Jack Dawson to pulp hero Rick O'Connell. But there was a problem. He'd already signed on to another film, The Beach. Bound by contract, he had to turn Universal down, and then fate twisted the knife. Production on The Beach was delayed. If DiCaprio had waited, he could have done both movies after all. By then, it was too late. The role of O'Connell had gone to Brendan Fraser, fresh from George of the Jungle. Fraser wasn't the obvious choice, but once the cameras rolled, he made the part his own, equal parts Indiana Jones swagger and goofball charm. And the irony couldn't be sharper. The role DiCaprio missed by a scheduling fluke became the one that defined Fraser's career. O'Connell didn't sail on the Titanic. He fought his way into pulp legend. Number 4. Before Rachel Weisz became Evelyn Carnahan, Universal was chasing other names. Jennifer Lopez was hot off Selena and Out of Sight. Ashley Judd had just broken out in Kiss the Girls. Both were considered for the role of the shy, bookish Egyptologist who stumbles into danger. But neither truly fit. The studio wanted someone who could be brainy and charming, but also vulnerable. The kind of heroine who could trip over her own feet in a library and still face down the undead with fire in her eyes. Then Rachel Weisz walked in. At the time, she was virtually unknown, with only a handful of credits. But in her audition, she showed exactly what Sommers was looking for. Intelligence with a spark, and a vulnerability that never felt weak. The role transformed her career overnight. Weisz later admitted she had no idea how big The Mummy would be, only that it gave her the part that changed everything. Jennifer Lopez and Ashley Judd disappeared from the conversation like sand in the wind, and in their place, a star was born in the desert.
I mean, the exact location.
You want to know?
Well, yes.
Do you really want to know? Then get me the hell out of here!
Number 5. Making The Mummy wasn't just tough, it was life-threatening. Stephen Sommers chose Morocco's Sahara Desert for authenticity, and instantly regretted it. The cast and crew worked in 120-degree heat, where camera equipment overheated, film stock warped, and crew members collapsed from dehydration. The studio even issued special insurance policies, covering not just medical emergencies, but kidnapping, because the region was considered so dangerous. And the desert itself seemed cursed. Venomous snakes slithered into camp, Scorpions crawled into boots. At one point, sandstorms swept through and buried equipment overnight, swallowing cameras and sets. Whole days of work disappeared in minutes. The production survived only because the crew treated every day like a battle against the elements. Summers later joked it felt like the real mummy was trying to stop them, but the truth was darker. The desert didn't want them there, and it nearly won. Number 6. It was supposed to be a stunt. Instead, it nearly killed him. During the prison execution sequence, Brendan Fraser stood on the gallows with a rope tied around his neck. The setup was carefully choreographed. The trapdoor would drop, the rope would go taut, but leave just enough slack to keep him safe. But something slipped. The knot tightened too far, and in an instant, the stunt became real. Fraser's face turned red. His body went limp. The crew thought he was giving the performance of his life, until they realized he had actually stopped breathing. Cameras stopped. People rushed in. For nearly 20 seconds, Fraser hung there unconscious. They cut him down and revived him. Later, he joked, "They killed me for 18 seconds." On screen, Rick O'Connell cheated death with pulp hero swagger. But behind the camera, Brendan Fraser had already faced it for real.
500 pounds.
Wakaf andak. And what else? I'm a very lonely man.
Number 7. Becoming Imhotep wasn't just acting. For Arnold Vosloo, it was punishment. Before CGI took over, makeup artists experimented with practical designs to transform him into the ancient priest. They buried him under hours of latex, paint, and prosthetics. His entire body was sealed beneath layers so thick he could barely move. By the time each session ended, his skin was raw, his face swollen, and his eyes bloodshot. Vosloo later admitted he would peel off the prosthetics and see red marks pressed into his flesh, as if the makeup itself had cursed him. At one point, he said he looked in the mirror and barely recognized the man staring back. The irony wasn't lost on him. He was playing a character punished in life by being buried alive, and the makeup made him feel almost the same. Before CGI resurrected him on screen, the makeup had already done it for real. For a while, Arnold Vosloo wasn't just playing the mummy, he looked like one. Number 8. Universal didn't hire Stephen Sommers for swashbuckling fun. They wanted horror, a dark, bloody remake that leaned into Karloff's shadow, a monster movie with sharp edges, not a pulp adventure with laughs. Sommers pushed back. He pitched The Mummy as part Indiana Jones, part Errol Flynn, a 1930s-style throwback where audiences could scream 1 minute and grin the next. He wanted romance, banter, and a hero who bumbled as much as he fought. Executives weren't convinced. They feared tone would sink the film before it even opened. Meetings dragged into arguments. Budgets hung in the balance. Sommers was told flat out to lean darker. He refused. And when cameras rolled, his version won. Brendan Fraser's quips, Rachel Weisz's charm, and pulp spectacle turned what could have been another forgotten monster remake into one of the last great adventure blockbusters of the 90s. Universal asked for fear. Sommers gave them fun, and that's why The Mummy still lives. Number 9. The desert didn't just attack with heat and storms, it poisoned them. Almost the entire cast and crew were flattened by food poisoning. Whole days of shooting were lost as actors collapsed, running for bathrooms or hospital tents. Everyone suffered, except one, Arnold Vosloo. He refused to eat anything local, insisting on food shipped from home. And while everyone else was sick in the sand, Vosloo walked through set untouched, calm as a resurrected priest. Imhotep may have been cursed on screen, but off-screen, he was the only one who survived. Number 10. One of Evelyn Carnahan's funniest moments nearly became one of the most dangerous. When she tips over the library shelves, it looks like slapstick comedy, but in reality, it was 2,000 books stacked on towering wooden shelves, rigged to fall like dominoes. If even one shelf misfired, the gag wouldn't work, and resetting the stunt would take days. Rachel Weisz insisted on doing it herself. No double, no cheats. But that made it even riskier. If she mistimed her movement by a second, the shelves could have come down on top of her, crushing her under real wood and steel. The crew held their breath. Cameras rolled. Weisz gave the push. For a split second, nothing. Then, perfection. The shelves toppled one after another, crashing in a flawless chain reaction while Weisz ducked out of the way at exactly the right moment. One chance, one miracle, one of the funniest scenes in the film that could have gone very, very wrong. Number 11. When Arnold Vosloo cursed, threatened, or chanted on screen, it wasn't Hollywood gibberish. It was real ancient Egyptian. Stephen Sommers wanted authenticity, so scholars were brought in to translate the script into phrases that hadn't been spoken aloud in thousands of years. years. Every curse Imhotep spat, every ritual chant, every plea to the gods was lifted directly from history. For Vosloo, that meant hours of drilling strange sounds and unfamiliar grammar until he could deliver them fluidly, in character, under hot lights, while covered in sweat and makeup. The effort worked. His growls and commands gave the character a weight that no fake language could. To the audience, it sounded alien and terrifying, but to Egyptologists, those were real words, stitched together from fragments of an ancient tongue. The irony? Audiences couldn't understand a syllable, but in every scene, Imhotep wasn't pretending to summon the dead. He was speaking in their own voice. Number 12. In 1999, no one had ever seen a villain like Imhotep. Industrial light and magic built him from the bones out, literally. A decaying skeleton, then muscle, then rotting skin layered on top. His body transformed in real time, frame by frame, with technology that had never been pushed this far before. The result was revolutionary. Every grimace, every patch of crumbling flesh looked alive. It became a blueprint for the digital monsters that followed, from Gollum to the T-1000. Audiences thought they were watching horror fantasy. In truth, they were watching the future. Number 13. For all the hype about CGI scarabs and digital sandstorms, most of The Mummy was old-school illusion, built with fire, shells, and wood crashing around real actors. The scarabs weren't just computer pixels. Many were real beetle shells, glued to stunt performers, and made to crawl through clever puppetry rigs. Actors could actually feel them skittering across their skin. Explosions weren't green screen either. They were full pyrotechnics, rigged to detonate in the Moroccan desert. Even the collapsing sets weren't visual trickery. Crews built massive walls and triggered them to fall, sending dust and debris pouring over the cast. That's why the movie still feels dangerous today. You can sense the weight of real things breaking, burning, and toppling. The desert wasn't filled with digital illusions. It was filled with practical chaos designed to look like a curse. Audiences thought they were watching fantasy, but what gave The Mummy its texture was reality. Number 14. The real heartbeat of The Mummy didn't come from collapsing temples or swarms of scarabs. It came from Jerry Goldsmith. The legendary composer built a score that fused old-fashioned swashbuckling adventure with haunting Middle Eastern textures. It gave the film its soul, elevating pulp spectacle into something operatic. Goldsmith was in the twilight of his career, juggling an exhausting workload with films like The Haunting and The 13th Warrior. Yet he poured himself into The Mummy, writing one of his last great orchestral epics. Trumpets blared like battle cries, strings carried the romance, and ancient scales wove a sense of timeless mystery. The score won him the BMI Award for Best Music and remains a fan favorite, often cited alongside John Williams's Indiana Jones. 5 years later, Goldsmith passed away, but this soundtrack still thunders like proof of why he was one of cinema's greatest musical storytellers. Number 15. Before the desert prologue, before Imhotep's curse, The Mummy almost began with a very different tone. Early cuts opened on the Universal logo, not the modern one, but a throwback redesigned in 1930s style, meant to look like the era when the story takes place. From there, the camera would fade into narration from Imhotep himself, speaking directly to the audience and setting up his tragic backstory. On paper, it was clever. In practice, it fell apart. Imhotep never speaks English in the film, and giving him an opening monologue shattered the illusion of mystery. Instead of menace, it made him sound ordinary. The studio quickly realized the villain would lose all power if audiences heard him chatting in the first 2 minutes, so the sequence was scrapped. In its place came the sweeping wordless prologue, a visual story of betrayal, forbidden love, and a curse carved into eternity. The logo vanished, the narration died, and the film didn't open with words. It opened with a curse. Number 16. When The Mummy was nearing release in 1999, Universal braced for failure. Another monster remake? Another attempt to revive Karloff's shadow? Executives feared audiences wouldn't care, and early critics didn't help. Test screenings brought words like too campy and too silly. Reviews predicted the film would vanish like dust in the desert. Some even said Universal had wasted $80 million chasing pulp that no one wanted. But the audiences who finally saw it didn't agree. They laughed at the banter, thrilled at the spectacle, and leaned into the very tone critics dismissed. What was mocked as camp became its secret strength. Universal expected humiliation. Critics expected disaster. Instead, they missed the magic, because the things they thought would kill The Mummy are the very things that keep it alive. Number 17. Universal feared it would flop. Critics called it too silly. Even the crew sometimes wondered if the desert ordeal had been worth it. And then opening weekend hit. On a budget of $80 million, The Mummy roared past expectations, pulling in over $415 million worldwide. What was supposed to be a one-off monster remake became one of the biggest box office surprises of 1999. Audiences couldn't get enough. Brendan Fraser's mix of swagger and slapstick made him an instant action star. Rachel Weisz's Evelyn gave the adventure its heart. Even Arnold Vosloo's Imhotep, half practical, half cutting-edge CGI, became a villain people loved to fear. The film didn't just succeed, it resurrected a franchise Universal thought was long dead. Sequels followed, spin-offs emerged, and suddenly, The Mummy was no longer a relic. It was alive again. The critics expected dust. The studio expected disaster, but audiences gave it gold.
Why did you kiss me?
No, I was about to be hanged. It seemed like a good idea at the time.
Oh.
What? What'd I say?
Number 18. Success didn't stop at the theater. It chased fans into the parks. Universal Studios built Revenge of the Mummy, a ride that mixed roller coaster thrills with pyrotechnics, practical effects, and Fraser's face looming on giant screens. It opened in 2004, and 2 decades later, it's still running. The movie that almost never got made still throws fans screaming into the dark, fire bursting at their sides. Because some curses don't fade, they ride forever. Number 19. For kids, the story didn't end in theaters. From 2001 to 2003, The Mummy, the animated series, ran for 2 full seasons. The O'Connell family kept fighting Imhotep, this time in Saturday morning cartoons. It wasn't as big as the films. It wasn't as beloved. But for a generation of kids, that's how they first met Rick and Evelyn. And while adults rewound VHS tapes, kids grabbed cereal bowls and tuned in. Because every adventure franchise eventually finds its way to Saturday morning. Number 20. Time didn't bury The Mummy. It made it immortal. What started as a risky gamble grew into a full-blown franchise. 2 sequels kept the saga alive. The Mummy Returns in 2001 and Tomb of the Dragon Emperor in 2008. The Rock launched his movie career with The Scorpion King. An animated series carried the adventure into Saturday mornings. And Universal even built Revenge of the Mummy, a theme park ride that still screams through the dark decades later. But the real immortality came from the fans. Brendan Fraser's grin, Rachel Weisz's spark, and a single line.
I'm a librarian.
That became a rallying cry for a generation. VHS tapes wore thin, DVDs were passed around dorm rooms, and later the internet turned it into meme legend. It didn't just survive the 90s blockbuster wave, it carved out a legacy. Because for a whole generation, The Mummy isn't just a movie, it's how adventure refused to die.
To stop this creature? Let me think.
Yes!
Question. Why doesn't he like cats?
Bonus fact, Patricia Velasquez's role as Anck-su-namun revealed almost everything. Aside from a loincloth, a few pieces of jewelry, and pasties, she was completely nude. Her costume wasn't fabric, it was body paint. 4 hours every morning, artists covered her in intricate gold and black designs that gleamed like armor under the lights. She had to stay still, couldn't sweat, couldn't lean, or the illusion would smear. And in a film filled with scarabs, curses, and collapsing temples, one of its most unforgettable images was created with nothing more than paint and patience. The Mummy was supposed to be a curse, just another monster remake doomed to vanish. Instead, it rose from the sand and refused to die. It burned through desert heat, near-fatal stunts, and skeptical critics. And somehow, out of all that chaos, it gave us a pulp adventure that still roars across screens, roller coasters, and memes decades later. If Brendan Fraser's grin, Rachel Weisz's spark, or even Imhotep's curse still lives in your memory, drop a comment. Tell us what legendary tale we should dig up next, because some stories aren't meant to fade. They're meant to live forever.